The sky is going from gold to that deep summer blue, the kind that only seems to happen at the end of a long July day. A screen door slaps shut somewhere down the block, and in the middle of a backyard, your backyard maybe, or one just like it, a little girl is holding a sparkler out at arm's length, watching it throw white sparks into the dusk, while the grown-ups laugh around a charcoal grill that's been going since noon. The whole yard smells like lighter fluid and hot dogs and fresh-cut grass. Somebody's radio is playing low on the picnic table, and nobody, not one single person, is in any hurry to go anywhere. That was the 4th of July, not the one on television, the one in the backyard. And tonight, we're going to walk back through 25 of those forgotten traditions, the ones that filled American summers in the 1970s, and then, somewhere along the way, quietly slipped out of our lives. Stay with me, because number 14 used to bring the whole street out of their houses at the very same hour, year after year. Number 6 was something kids did with their own two hands that no store would dream of selling them today. And number 1 is the picture most of you have been carrying in your memory for years, the one that says home better than any photograph ever could. Here's the thing though. Most of this didn't disappear all at once. There was no single day when the backyard 4th of July ended. It went quietly. A fire ordinance here, a new subdivision there, a big organized fireworks show downtown that slowly took the place of the one your neighbors used to put on right in the middle of the street. Nobody set out to take it from us, but somewhere along the line, the holiday stopped being something we made together and became something we drove to and watched from a distance. It wasn't all perfect back then, we know that, but something warm was lost, and tonight we're going to remember it. So before we begin, if you remember any of this, if you can still smell the charcoal and hear the bottle rockets going off 2 yards over, do me a favor and subscribe. This channel is for the people who remember. Let's bring it back, one tradition at a time. Let's start the countdown. Number 25. The fireworks catalog from the corner store. Before the big striped tents went up in the grocery store parking lot, before the warehouse on the edge of town, there was the catalog. Maybe it came folded in the mail. Maybe it sat in a worn stack by the register at the corner store, its cover bright with red rockets and gold starbursts. And for a kid in June, getting your hands on one was the closest thing to holding the whole summer in your lap. What people forget is how much of this was ordered by mail back then. You could thumb through those pages, the Roman candles, the fountains, the bricks of firecrackers with names that sounded like they came off a circus poster, and dream about what your family might bring home that year. Half the fun happened before the 4th even arrived. You'd dog-ear the pages. You'd argue with your brother over which assortment was worth the money, and your dad would do the math out loud at the kitchen table, pretending he wasn't going to buy any of it, then bringing home a bag of it anyway. The catalog faded as the rules tightened, state by state, and as the big seasonal stands took over the business. The dreaming by mail part just quietly went away. You buy fireworks now, sure, but you don't spend 2 weeks in June imagining them first. That catalog wasn't just a price list. It was the start of the countdown, weeks before the sky ever lit up. Number 24. The instant camera photo by the grill. Picture it. Everybody's standing in front of the grill, squinting into the late sun, Grandpa with the spatula, the kids out front, and somebody calls, "Hold still," and then comes that mechanical whir, and a gray square slides out into your hand. And you all stand there in the backyard, waiting, watching that picture slowly bloom into color right in front of your eyes. That little miracle was its own event. No one had ever seen anything like a photograph that developed in your hand, in the yard, in under a minute. You'd shake it. Everybody shook it, even though you weren't supposed to, and watch your own family rise up out of the gray. And then it got passed around, still warm, fingerprints on the white border, while folks said, "Oh, look at us." One copy. That was it. One single picture of that exact afternoon, and it usually ended up stuck to the refrigerator door for the rest of the summer. What replaced it was endless, and free, and somehow worth less for it. We take 50 photos now and look at none of them. Back then you got one, and you held on to it like it mattered. Because it did. Somewhere in a shoebox, that picture is still there. A little faded now. But everybody in it was happy. Number 23. The battery radio out on the picnic table. Set it on the corner of the table, next to the potato salad, and turn the dial until the local station came in clear. That little box, with its leather strap and its tinny speaker, was the soundtrack of the whole afternoon. The ball game in the background, a patriotic march, a song everybody knew the words, to drifting out over the lawn chairs. These radios were a marvel when they first reached every household. For the first time, music could go wherever you went. Out to the yard, down to the lake, out on the porch swing, no cord, no furniture, just sound following you into the summer. So the grown-ups would talk over it and tap their feet to it, and somebody's uncle would reach over and turn it up when the right song came on. It wasn't background noise. It was the heartbeat of the day, low and steady underneath everything else. Then the music moved indoors and got bigger, and the yard got quieter. The big speakers and the headphones came, and somewhere in there we stopped all listening to the same song at the same time, out under the same sky. One small radio, one station, one afternoon that the whole neighborhood seemed to share. Number 22. The patriotic decorations made by hand. Long before you could grab a bag of red, white, and blue everything at the store, the decorating started at the kitchen table. Crepe paper streamers. Construction paper stars cut out by the kids, a little crooked, taped up anyway. A bed sheet with stripes painted on it, hung over the porch rail. Whatever the house had, the house became. What we forget is that decorating for the 4th was something you did, not something you bought. The whole family pitched in. Somebody dug the box out of the closet, and inside were the same paper flags and faded bunting from last year, soft at the folds, ready for one more summer. And so the morning of the 4th had its own quiet ritual. The streamers going up, the kids running the paper chains down the porch steps, your mother stepping back to see if it was even. By noon, the whole house wore its colors. The store-bought stuff came later, brighter and easier, and the kitchen table afternoon faded with it. You can buy a perfect patriotic yard in 10 minutes now. It just doesn't have anyone's fingerprints on it. The decorations weren't perfect. That was the point. You could see the hands that made them. Number 21, the charcoal grill in the middle of the yard. It sat right out in the open, that round black kettle on 3 spindly legs, and getting it going was a whole production. The bag of briquettes, the lighter fluid, the match, the whoosh, and then the long wait while Dad stood guard, telling everyone it wasn't ready yet. Not yet. Hold on. This was the dad job of the whole year. Charcoal grilling was slow and smoky and a little bit dangerous, and the man at the grill wore it like a badge. You couldn't rush it. You had to wait for the coals to go gray and glow, and the whole yard learned to wait with him. So that smell, the charcoal smoke curling up over the fence, drifting 3 yards down, became the smell of the 4th itself. You could close your eyes anywhere in the neighborhood and know exactly what day it was. Hot dogs first, because they were fast. Burgers after. And a kid hovering close, hoping to be handed the first one. Gas grills came along, quick and clean, and the slow charcoal afternoon got faster. Nothing wrong with easy, but the waiting was part of it. The standing around the coals, the whole day built around one slow fire. That smoke is still the smell of summer to anyone who lived it. Some things you remember with your nose before your mind. Number 20. The homemade popsicles from the hand crank mold. Out of the freezer came the tray, that set of plastic molds with the little reusable handles, and inside was whatever your mother had poured in days before. Kool-Aid, usually. Sometimes leftover juice. Frozen solid, and yours for the asking on the hottest afternoon of the year. Half the magic was the waiting. You poured it yourself, you pushed the sticks in, and then you had to leave it alone. For hours, for a whole day, while it froze. No buying one off a truck. You earned this one by being patient, which for a kid in July was its own kind of torture. And then you ran it under the warm tap for a second to loosen it, and it slid out, and the color stained your tongue and ran down your wrist in the heat faster than you could keep up. You sat on the back step and raced the sun to finish it. The store freezers filled up with everything imaginable, and the little molds got shoved to the back of the cabinet and forgotten. Easier to just buy a box. But you didn't make those. You didn't wait for those. A homemade popsicle tasted like patience and summer. We traded it for convenience and never quite noticed. Number 19. The red checkered cloth on the picnic table. It came out once a year, that red and white checkered cloth, a little stained from summers past, and it turned a plain old picnic table into the center of the whole celebration. Spread it out, weigh the corners against the breeze, and suddenly it was a holiday. Funny how one piece of cloth did so much. It wasn't fancy. Most families had the same one, or one close enough. But unfolding it was a signal. The food was coming, the day was really here, everybody find a seat. And what landed on it, the potato salad in the big bowl, the deviled eggs nobody could keep the flies off of, the watermelon, the baked beans, the bag of buns going soft in the heat. The whole family rotated around that cloth all afternoon, picking, talking, swatting bees, going back for more. The backyard spread gave way to catered trays and store platters, and the cloth that came out once a year stopped coming out at all. You can order it all done now. It's just that nobody unfolds anything anymore. That checkered cloth meant the family was about to gather. Some signals, once you've lost them, the table feels bare without. There's a thread running through everything we've named so far, and it's worth pausing on for a moment. Notice how much of the Old Fourth was built around fire. The grill, the sparklers, the bottle rockets going off in every other yard. For most of the early 1970s, in a lot of the country, setting off your own fireworks at home was simply normal. Something families did without thinking twice, the way they'd done for generations. What changed wasn't anyone's love for the holiday. It was the rules around the fire. Year by year, state by state, the laws tightened. Some places limited what you could buy. Some allowed only the small stuff, the sparklers, the fountains, the things that stayed on the ground. And some, over time, banned backyard fireworks almost entirely. The reasons were real, and it's only fair to say so. There were fires. There were injuries, often to children. Insurance companies grew wary, and dry summers made whole counties nervous. Nobody was wrong to worry. These were safety laws, written by people trying to keep families from getting hurt. But here's the quiet thing that happened alongside it. As the backyard fireworks went away, so did the reason for the whole street to gather in one place. The fire had been the thing that pulled everyone together, and as it dimmed, year by year, so did a little of the gathering. We didn't lose the 4th of July, we just slowly stopped lighting it ourselves. So let's keep going, because the next stretch is all about the neighborhood, back when the whole street showed up. Number 18. The live TV broadcast of the big city fireworks. Late in the evening, after the yard had gone quiet and the little ones were winding down, somebody would head inside and turn on the set. And there it was! The big show, from some great city far away. The sky over a river exploding in color, while a band played somewhere beneath it. The whole family would crowd into the living room, the screen flickering across their faces in the dark. This was a genuine event back then. There weren't many channels, and everybody watching was watching the same thing at the same moment. Across the whole country, families were sitting in their living rooms, looking up at the very same sky, on the very same screen. You were alone in your house, and part of something enormous, all at once. So you'd sit there on the floor, close to the set, and ooh and ah right along with the crowd you couldn't see. The grand finale would come, the sky going white with it, and your mother would say, "Now that's something," and for a minute, the whole country felt like one room. The channels multiplied, and the screens got smaller and scattered through the house, and that one shared broadcast stopped being the thing everyone gathered for. We can watch anything now, anytime. We just don't all watch it together anymore. For one night, the whole nation looked up at the same time. That's a kind of togetherness we don't quite have now. Number 17. The Backyard Talent Show. Somewhere around dusk, When the food was settling and the grown-ups were loose in their lawn chairs, the kids would decide it was time to put on a show. A patch of grass became a stage. A flashlight became a spotlight. And one brave cousin would stand up and sing, or tell jokes, or do cartwheels, while everybody clapped whether it was any good or not. What's easy to forget is that this entertainment came from nowhere but the people there. No screen, no hired act, nobody famous. Just the family, making the fun themselves out of whatever the evening offered. Boredom was the mother of it, and boredom turned out to be a gift. So you'd watch your little sister forget the words and start over, and your uncle get up and do his one trick, and somebody's grandfather tell the same story he told every year. It was small and homemade and a little silly, and the laughter was real, rolling out across the dark yard. As the screens came into every hand, the entertainment stopped coming from the people in the chairs. Why put on a show when there's one already playing in your palm? The yard got quieter. The kids stopped getting up. We used to make our own fun, right there in the grass. Now it's made for us, somewhere else. Number 16. The whole street decorated with paper flags. Walk down the block on the morning of the 4th, and you'd see it house after house. Little paper flags lining the fences, taped to the mailboxes, strung along the porches, fluttering from the handlebars of every bike on the street. Not one yard, the whole street, dressed up together, as if the neighborhood had agreed on it without ever holding a meeting. The remarkable part was that nobody organized it. There was no committee, no sign-up sheet. One neighbor put out their flags, and the next one saw and did the same, and by mid-morning the entire block was wearing the same colors. It just happened, the way good things in a close neighborhood used to just happen. And so the street itself became part of the celebration. You'd walk it slowly, taking in everybody's decorations, nodding to folks on their porches, the whole block humming with the same quiet pride. You belonged to it. You could see that you belonged to it. Right there on every fence. As neighborhoods grew more private and people came to know each other less, that unspoken agreement faded. The flags still come out at some houses. They just don't ripple all the way down the street the way they used to. A whole block dressed the same, with nobody in charge of it. That's what a neighborhood was. Number 15. The backyard games between the families. Out came the rope for the tug of war, and the burlap sacks for the sack race, and suddenly the whole afternoon had stakes. Kids against grown-ups. One family against another. Bare feet digging into the grass, everybody hollering, somebody always landing flat on their back to a roar of laughter that carried over the fence. These weren't bought games. The whole setup was whatever the yard already had. A length of rope from the garage, a couple of old feed sacks, an egg balanced on a spoon. The fun was free, improvised, and a little rough, and the only equipment that really mattered was a yard full of people willing to look foolish. So you'd line up across from your own father in the tug of war, dig in your heels, and pull until you collapsed in a heap. You'd race down the lawn in a sack, falling, getting up, falling again, while everybody cheered you on by name. Grass stains and skinned knees, and a ribbon made of nothing. You'd never felt more alive. As the years went on, and the gatherings got smaller and more careful, those rowdy yard games slipped away. There's less running now, less falling down on purpose, less of the whole family out there in the grass together. The games cost nothing and gave everything. All they ever needed was a yard full of people who'd shown up. Number 14. The ice cream truck coming down the street. You'd hear it before you saw it. That tinkling little melody drifting up from the far end of the block, growing closer, and every kid within earshot would freeze mid-game, heads turning, already running for the house to find a quarter. By the time the truck rounded the corner, half the neighborhood's children were spilling off porches and across lawns to meet it. This was the sound of summer made into music. The truck came around all season, but on the 4th it felt like part of the celebration itself, pulling up right when the afternoon heat was at its worst. And the man driving it knew the kids by name, knew which one always wanted the rocket pop, knew to wait an extra second for the little one running flat out down the driveway. So you'd stand at the window with your sticky quarter, scanning the faded pictures taped to the side, and make the biggest decision of your whole day. The cold of it, the colors of it, The way the red and white and blue one was always the one to get on the 4th. You ate it fast before the sun took it. The trucks grew scarcer over the years. Costs, rules, streets where kids no longer played out front. That song still stops a grown adult in their tracks if they hear it. Some part of you is always 9 years old, running for a quarter. The whole street came running for that song. Now the streets are quiet, and the song mostly comes in memory. Number 13. The Watermelon Eating Contest. Somebody would haul out the biggest melon they could find, split it into dripping wedges, and line the kids up along the picnic table, and on the word, go, every face dove straight in. Juice everywhere, seeds flying, cheeks smeared pink to the ears, hands a sticky mess, the grown-ups doubled over laughing at the sight of it. The whole point was the mess. There were no real rules, no real prize, and the seeds, back then the melons had seeds, big black ones, became their own event, spat across the yard in distance contests that went on long after the eating was done. It was wasteful and sticky and gloriously pointless, which was exactly why it was perfect. So you'd bury your face in that cold wedge on the hottest day of the year, racing the cousin beside you, the sweetness running down your chin and your forearms, and come up gasping with a grin stained red. Then somebody hosed you all off in the yard, and you did it again. The seedless melons came, and the gatherings got tidier, and the great sticky free-for-all quietly faded out. We made things cleaner. We made them a little less fun, too. A face full of watermelon and a yard full of laughing. You didn't need a prize. You'd already won the day. Number 12. The kids selling lemonade on the corner. Out near the curb, where the foot traffic was, the kids set up shop. A card table, a hand-lettered sign, a pitcher of lemonade sweating in the sun, and a cigar box for the coins. A nickel a cup, maybe a dime, and every neighbor who passed stopped, whether they were thirsty or not, because you always stopped for the kids on the corner. This was a child's first taste of running something. You squeezed the lemons, or your mother did, and you mixed it too sweet or too sour, and you sat out there in the heat all afternoon guarding your little business. The 4th brought out the crowds, and a good corner could clear a whole dollar in coins, a fortune, jingling in the cigar box. So you'd call out to folks walking by, and make change with great seriousness, and feel for the first time the strange pride of having made something people wanted. The regulars overpaid on purpose. The mailman always bought a cup. The whole street conspired, gently, to make you feel like a success. As the years went by, fewer kids sat out front, and fewer neighbors strolled past on foot, and the corner stands grew rare. There's more worry now about kids out by the road, about strangers, about 100 things, some of it fair, but the corner got lonelier for it. A nickel a cup, and the whole neighborhood overpaying on purpose. That's how a street looked after its own. Let's pause here for a moment, because something bigger was shifting underneath all of this, and it's the quiet heart of the whole story. Look back at what we've named: the talent show, the street full of flags nobody organized, the ice cream man who knew every kid by name, the neighbors who overpaid for lemonade just to make a child feel proud. None of that ran on money or planning. It ran on one thing: people knowing the people who lived around them. In the 1970s, a neighborhood was still mostly a place where you stayed. Folks knew the names up and down the block. The kids ran between yards like the fences weren't there, and the 4th of July was the day all of that closeness came out into the open, into the street, where everyone could see it. Then, slowly, the shape of how we live began to change. Families moved more often and stayed less long. New subdivisions went up, with the houses turned inward. The life moved to the back deck behind the fence instead of the front porch by the street. The big organized fireworks show downtown gave everyone a reason to leave the neighborhood on the one night they used to fill it. None of that was anybody's fault. Exactly. People were busy. The world got faster. The new houses were nicer in a dozen ways. But the front porch, know your neighbor closeness that made the old 4th possible, that got thinner, year by year, almost too slowly to notice. And that's the real thing we lost. Not the holiday, the neighborhood the holiday used to happen in. So let's keep going, because the next stretch takes us back into the yard, into the things you could still almost reach out and touch. Number 11. The homemade red, white, and blue outfits. On the morning of the 4th, your mother would lay it out on the bed, something she'd put together herself. A shirt sewn from fabric with little stars on it. A dress run up on the machine the night before. Or just the careful pulling together of whatever the dresser drawers held that happened to be red, white, or blue. And out the door you went, dressed for the day by hand. What we forget is how much of a family's clothes still came from a sewing machine back then. Store-bought holiday outfits weren't a thing you ran out and grabbed. If you were going to wear the colors, somebody you loved usually made it happen, bent over the machine in the lamplight after you'd gone to bed. So you'd stand there while your mother checked the hem and licked her thumb to fix your hair, sending you off looking your patriotic best. Maybe it didn't quite match. Maybe the stitching showed. But somebody had spent an evening making sure you had something special to wear, and you could feel it all day. The racks filled up with cheap holiday shirts, easier and brighter than anything homemade, and the sewing machine went quiet in the closet. Nothing wrong with easy. But the easy ones came from a factory, not from somebody sitting up late thinking of you. Somebody made you ready for that day with their own two hands. That's a kind of love you wear. Number 10. The American flag raised on the porch at first light. Early on the morning of the 4th, before the heat, before the noise, a screen door would open and your father, or your grandfather, would step out onto the porch and raise the flag. Slide it into the bracket by the door, straighten it, step back. A small thing, done quietly, before most of the house was even awake. For that generation, this was no small gesture. Many of the men raising those flags had served, or had brothers and fathers who had. The flag on the porch wasn't decoration to them. It was something closer to a salute, a private moment of meaning before the hot dogs and the horseplay began. So you might catch it from the kitchen window, your grandfather standing out there a second longer than he needed to, looking up at it. He didn't make a speech. He didn't explain it. He just put it out every year, the same way, and somehow you understood that it mattered to him in a way that ran deep. The flags still go up at some houses, but the generation that raised them with that particular weight in their hands is leaving us, and something of that quiet, wordless reverence is going with them. He never said much about it. He just raised it every year, at first light, and you knew. Number 9. The decorated bicycles parade. Days before the 4th, the kids got to work, weaving crepe paper through the spokes, taping playing cards to the frame so they'd slap against the wheels, threading red, white, and blue streamers from the handlebars. And on the morning itself, the whole pack of them would ride up and down the block in a parade that nobody had to plan, cards flapping, streamers flying. This was the children's own contribution to the day, made entirely by them. No grown-up organized it. The kids just knew, the way kids knew things then, that you decorated your bike and you rode it proud on the 4th, and the more it rattled and fluttered the better. So you'd spend an afternoon getting yours just right, arguing over whose looked best, and then ride out into the morning sun in a ragged little procession, ringing your bell, feeling for all the world like the star of a real parade. The grown-ups came out to their porches to watch and wave. For one morning, the street belonged to the children. As the bikes moved indoors to screens and the streets emptied of kids on summer mornings, the homemade parade faded out. The bicycles are still in the garages. They just don't ride out decorated anymore, and nobody lines the porch to wave. A parade the kids threw for themselves, down a street that came out to watch. You didn't need a permit to be proud. Number 8. The whole neighborhood at the barbecue. By late afternoon, the smoke was rising from every yard on the block, and the gates between them may as well have come off the hinges. Folks drifted from one cookout to the next, plate in hand, kids streaming between yards. A paper cup of something cold passed over the fence. It wasn't one family's barbecue. It was the whole street's, spread across a dozen yards at once. What's hard to explain now is how loose and open it all was. You didn't need a formal invitation to end up in a neighbor's yard. The line between our cookout and theirs simply dissolved for the day. Somebody's potato salad ended up on your table. Your burgers ended up feeding their cousins. Nobody kept track. So you'd wander the block in the golden light, full and happy, stopping to talk at every fence, the grown-ups laughing in their lawn chairs while the kids ran wild from yard to yard until the streetlights came on. You belonged to all of it. The whole neighborhood was, for one evening, a single backyard. As the years went by and the fences grew taller, and the neighbors grew stranger to one another, that easy drifting between yards faded. We still barbecue. We just mostly do it behind the fence now, with the gate closed, among our own. The whole block was one backyard once. You could walk into any of it and you were home. Number 7. The homemade lemonade and the ice-cold watermelon. In the worst of the afternoon heat, the relief came from two places: a sweating pitcher of lemonade somebody had squeezed by hand that morning, and a watermelon that had been sitting in a tub of ice, or down in the creek, getting cold all day. Both of them waited in the shade, and both of them meant the same thing. Come sit, cool off, you're among family. The lemonade was real back then. Lemons and sugar and water and a wooden spoon, made in a big glass pitcher and poured over ice that came from a tray, not a machine. And the watermelon had been chosen with care, thumped and judged at the market days before, then chilled down hard, so the first bite was a shock of cold and sweet on a 100-degree day. So you'd come in off the hot grass, red-faced and worn out, and somebody would hand you a cup and cut you a wedge, and you'd sit in the shade and feel the whole day get bearable again. The grown-ups lingered over theirs, talking. The kids gulped and ran back out. That pitcher got refilled all afternoon long. The mixes and the bottles and the pre-cut tubs came along, faster and easier, and the hand-squeezed pitcher got rarer every summer. It all tastes fine. It just doesn't taste like somebody spent their morning on you. Cold watermelon and hand-squeezed lemonade in the shade. That was somebody saying, without a word, that they were glad you came. Number 6. The firecrackers and snappers the kids set off in the street. Here's the one a lot of you have been waiting for. Out in the street, away from the grown-ups, the kids had their own small arsenal. The little firecrackers, the strips of caps, and best of all, the snappers. Those tiny twists of paper you threw down hard on the pavement to make them pop. A handful of those in your pocket, and you were the most powerful 9-year-old on the block. Think about it. These were things children handled themselves, with their own hands, mostly unsupervised, in a way no store would dream of selling to a kid today. You learned the hard way which ones to respect. You learned to throw the snappers at your sister's feet to make her jump, and to light a firecracker and run, heart pounding, before it went off behind you. So the street on the 4th had this constant low percussion to it. The pop of caps, the crack of snappers on the sidewalk, the occasional bigger bang from the older kids, and all of it ours. The children's own private celebration running alongside the grown-ups. It was a little dangerous. It was completely thrilling. It was the most freedom a kid felt all year. As the rules tightened and the worry grew, those small fireworks slipped out of children's hands, and probably for some good reasons. But a kind of independence went with them, the trust that let a kid loose with a pocketful of pops and a long summer evening. A pocketful of snappers and the whole street to run. We trusted kids to be kids back then. Number 5. The bottle rockets going off from every other yard. As the light finally started to go, the first whistle would rise from somewhere down the block, then a pop high overhead, and then another from the other direction, and another, until the whole neighborhood was launching them. Bottle rockets, fired from an old soda bottle in the grass, streaking up over the rooftops from a dozen yards at once. No show, no schedule, just the whole street, lighting up the sky together. This was the homemade fireworks display, and it belonged to everybody. Each family had their stash, and as the dark came on, every yard became its own little launch pad. There was no one in charge, no grand finale, no announcer, just the glorious, overlapping racket of a neighborhood that had decided, all on its own, to fill the sky. So you'd stand out in the yard in the warm dark, neck craned back, watching your own family's rockets climb up to join everybody else's, the whole sky over the block crackling and flashing. The dads got serious about it. The kids shrieked at every one. And the smoke drifted down over all of it, that sharp sulfur smell that meant the night had truly arrived. As the backyard fireworks laws spread, those bottle rockets rising from every yard grew quieter, year by year, until in many places they stopped altogether. The sky over the neighborhood went dark and waited for the official show instead. The whole street used to light its own sky. Nobody organized it, and somehow it was perfect. Number 4. The children with sparklers at dusk. Of everything on this whole list, this might be the image that stays with you longest. That moment when the light had nearly gone, and the grown-ups passed out the sparklers and lit them one by one, and suddenly the yard was full of children, each one holding a little wand of white fire, spinning, running, writing their names in the air with the glow. There was real magic in it, and a little danger too, which is exactly why kids never forgot it. You held fire in your own hand. You were told to keep it away from your face, away from your sister, and you mostly did. And in the meantime you discovered that if you moved it fast enough in the dark, you could leave a trail of light hanging in the air for just a second before it faded. So the whole yard at dusk became this scene of small glowing figures, darting through the blue dark, parents watching from the lawn chairs with that mix of worry and joy, the little ones shrieking with delight. It lasted only a minute, each sparkler, but you remembered it for 50 years. The fizz of it, the smell, the way the whole evening seemed to hold its breath. The sparklers haven't vanished the way the rockets did. You can still find them. But the scene around them has thinned out. Fewer kids, fewer yards full of them, the gatherings smaller than they were. A child writing her name in fire against the dark. If you saw it once, you've never quite let it go. Number 3. The morning after street, scattered with the remains of the night. The morning of the 5th had a quiet all its own. You'd step out onto the porch, the day already warm, and there it was. The whole street littered with the evidence of the night before. Spent firework casings in the gutters. Burnt out sparkler wires in the grass. Bits of red paper from the firecrackers scattered down the sidewalk like confetti the whole neighborhood had thrown together. There was something almost tender about that mess. It wasn't trash, exactly. It was the leftover proof that something wonderful had happened here. That every house on the block had been part of the same long, loud, happy night. You could read the whole celebration in what it left behind, yard by yard, the way you'd read tracks in the snow. So you'd walk out barefoot into that hazy morning, the air still faintly sharp with yesterday's smoke, and survey it all, the cul-de-sac still wearing its hangover of paper and ash. The grown-ups moved slow with their coffee. Somebody, eventually, got out a broom. And there was no hurry about any of it, because the whole point of the cleanup was that there'd been something worth cleaning up. As the backyard fireworks went quiet, so did that morning after street. There's nothing to sweep now. The official show downtown cleans up after itself, miles away, and the neighborhood wakes up on the 5th looking exactly as it did on the 3rd. A street full of yesterday's celebration. Even the mess was something we shared. Number 2. The neighbors gathering in the street as the dark came down. As the last light drained out of the sky, something pulled everyone out of their yards and into the street itself. The grown-ups carried their lawn chairs out to the curb. The kids ran loose in the warm dark. And the whole block, all the families who'd spent the day in their separate yards, came together in the one place that belonged to all of them, the middle of the road, under the first stars. This was the moment the neighborhood became most fully itself. The fences didn't matter now. People who only waved across driveways all year stood shoulder to shoulder in the street, faces turned up, waiting for the dark to finish coming on. The old folks in their chairs, the young couples, the babies asleep on shoulders, everyone out of their houses, together, in the open. So you'd find your place out there among them, the asphalt still giving back the day's heat through your shoes, and feel that particular thing that only happened on this one night. The whole street, all these separate lives, gathered in one spot and looking the same direction. Nobody had called a meeting. They'd just come out, the way people did, drawn to one another in the dark. As the years went on and the neighborhoods grew more private, and the official shows pulled everyone away to watch from a distance, that gathering in the street faded. People stayed in their own yards or drove off to the park, and the road in front of the houses stayed empty on the one night it used to fill. The whole block, out in the street together, looking up at the same dark. That's the part the law could never have taken. We just slowly stopped coming out. And so we come to number 1, the one you've been waiting for, the picture most of you have carried all this time. Number 1, the neighbors setting off real fireworks in the middle of the street, with the whole block gathered to watch. It happened after full dark, when the bottle rockets and the sparklers had done their work, and the children were tired and happy, and the grown-ups had that loose, golden feeling of a long, good day. Somebody, there was always a somebody, would carry the big stuff out to the middle of the road. The real fireworks. The ones that went up high and came down in color over the rooftops. And without a word passing between anyone, the whole block would gather along the curbs to watch. No permit, no professional, no barrier rope, no safety announcement, no man in a uniform, just a father out there in the street with a punk and a row of fireworks lined up on the warm asphalt, and the entire neighborhood ringed around him in the dark, trusting him, cheering him, the kids held back on the porches by their mother's arms. It was the homemade grand finale, and every street in America seemed to have its own. So you'd stand there in the warm summer night, packed in close with everyone you grew up around, the family from 2 doors down, the old couple on the corner, the kids you went to school with, all of you with your faces turned up to the same patch of sky as your neighbor sent the light climbing over the rooftops. The boom of it rolled down the street and came back off the houses. The little ones covered their ears and grinned. And for those few minutes, looking up together, you weren't a street full of separate families anymore. You were one thing. You were home. That, more than the grill, more than the flag, more than any of it, that is the thing we lost. The night the whole neighborhood lit up its own sky and stood together in the street to watch. Now, let's be honest with each other, the way we've tried to be all along. It didn't disappear because anyone stopped loving it. It went the way most good things go, quietly, for reasons that mostly made sense. The fire laws came, and they came for real reasons, because people got hurt and houses burned, and a dry summer could put a whole town at risk. The neighborhoods changed, the fences got taller, the families moved more often and knew each other less, and the big professional shows downtown gave everybody a beautiful, safe, easy reason to leave the street and watch from a folding chair in a parking lot a few miles away. None of that was wrong. The 4th of July is still here. The sky still lights up every year, bigger and brighter and more dazzling than anything your neighbor ever managed with a punk and a soda bottle. But it's farther away now. We watch it instead of making it. We drive to it instead of walking out our own front doors into it. And the thing that's missing isn't the fireworks. It's the people standing shoulder to shoulder in the street. The neighbors, the closeness, the whole block out together in the dark, looking up at a sky they had lit themselves. That's the America we lost. Not the holiday. The togetherness it used to be made of. But here's the good news. You remember it. And as long as you remember it, it isn't entirely gone. So let me ask you tonight, which one of these did your family do? Were you the kid with the sparkler, writing your name in the dark? Did your father raise the flag at first light, or stand out in the street with the big fireworks while the whole block watched? Was there an ice cream truck, a lemonade stand, a checkered cloth on your picnic table? Tell me down in the comments. Tell me what street you grew up on and what your 4th of July sounded like. Somebody reading this grew up 2 blocks from you, and they remember it too. Let's fill the comments tonight with the neighborhood we all came from. And if this brought it back for you, if you felt the warm asphalt, and smelled the smoke, and saw those faces turned up to the sky, then go back and watch the one we did before this. It's called 25 Forgotten Things That Were Normal in the 1970s, but illegal today. It's waiting for you right now, and it'll take you right back there again. We'll keep remembering, together, one tradition at a time. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you back here soon.